My name is Monica, and I'm 61 years old. Last night, my own son hit me until I bled because the soup had no salt. That's what started it. A missing pinch of salt. Something so small, so ordinary, became the reason for the worst pain a mother can feel. The bowl shattered against the wall. The soup splashed over my face, and the porcelain cut into my lip. I remember the sound before I remember the sting. That sharp crack echoing through the kitchen, followed by silence heavy enough to crush me. I stood there, trembling, watching him breathe heavily as if he were the one hurt. Then he turned away, calm again, and went upstairs to sleep. Just like that, and no guilt, no hesitation, as if bruising his mother was part of his daily routine, as natural as brushing his teeth or tying his tie for work. If you're hearing my voice right now, please take a moment to give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to Whispers of Mama Ruth, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It may not seem like much, but you never know who might find courage in your words. Somewhere out there, another woman might be sitting in a kitchen like mine, cleaning blood off the floor and believing she's all alone. She's not. None of us are. Every story told makes another voice braver. When I woke up this morning, the world felt heavier. My arms ached, my ribs burned when I breathed, and my lip pulsed with every heartbeat. But the physical pain wasn't what made me cry. It was the humiliation, the realization that I, who once stood tall and independent, had become invisible inside my own home. I got out of bed at 5 in the morning like every other day, because habit doesn't disappear with dignity. Ethan was already awake, sitting at the table in his gray suit, scrolling through his phone. His coffee was steaming, his expression unreadable. He didn't look up when I entered. "Breakfast," he said, his tone clipped, commanding, without warmth. I froze for a second, waiting for an apology that never came. There was none. His voice was flat, casual, as if the events of last night had been erased, as if the bruise on my cheek was something only I could see. I moved automatically. 2 eggs scrambled soft, 3 spoonfuls of shredded cheese, 2 slices of toast, black coffee with no sugar. The same every morning, perfect down to the last crumb. I've learned that perfection is survival. I've memorized his likes, his dislikes, his triggers, his silences. I've learned that peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the fragile moment before it begins again. As I placed his breakfast on the table, I noticed his reflection in the window. Tall, polished, untouchable. The kind of man strangers would call successful. The kind of son any mother would be proud of. The kind of lie I built my life around. Then I heard the key turning in the front door. The click of heels on tile. The smell of expensive perfume cutting through the scent of burnt toast. It was Savannah, Ethan's wife, a young woman of grace and glass, beautiful in a way that hurts to look at. She wore a soft green dress and a smile painted just as carefully. "Good morning, Mrs. Davis," she said sweetly. "How are you this morning?" I wanted to tell her the truth. That my son had thrown boiling soup at me. That I spent the night on the kitchen floor scrubbing blood out of the grout. That I'm terrified every time I hear his footsteps. But instead, I swallowed those words and said the same thing I always do. "I'm fine, dear. Thank you. Are you going to have breakfast, Savannah?" I asked, my voice small, hoping for something. Maybe kindness, maybe suspicion. But Ethan looked at me sharply. That look, the one that slices through you without a word. It said, "Don't you dare." His eyes warned me that any misstep, any word out of place, would cost me more than I could afford. Then, with that smooth, practiced smile he wears for guests. He pulled out a small golden box and placed it in front of me. "Look, Mom," he said, "I bought you this new makeup. It's perfect for covering those little scrapes you got when you tripped last night." Scrapes. That's what he called them. As if I had tripped on his fist. As if the blood on the kitchen floor had been clumsiness, not cruelty. Inside the box was a bottle of foundation. Expensive, imported, the kind Savannah uses. It probably cost more than a week of groceries. And knowing him, he bought it with my money. He manages my entire pension for my own good. He says a woman my age shouldn't handle finances alone. That's how he phrases it. Politely, gently, while draining every last drop of independence from me. Savannah smiled at him, admiration glowing in her eyes. "You're so thoughtful, honey. Always taking care of your mom." If only she knew. If only she saw the truth behind that tenderness. The manipulation, the control. The bruises hidden beneath my sleeves. He finished his coffee, kissed her on the cheek, and leaned close to me. His breath smelled of arrogance and roasted beans. "Remember what we talked about," he whispered. "If you ever open your mouth about anything that happens here, you'll regret it. No one will believe you. You're just a crazy old woman living off her son's charity." Then he smiled, soft and polite, and they walked out hand in hand, the perfect couple for the world to adore. When their car disappeared down the street, the silence returned. Not the peaceful kind, but the suffocating kind that presses on your lungs. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I once celebrated birthdays and Christmases, now scarred and sticky with yesterday's violence. My hands were shaking. My reflection in the window looked unfamiliar, a woman painted in fear, powdered with shame. I used to recognize myself. I was a woman who worked 40 years as an executive secretary at Sullivan and Associates. I handled court schedules, managed deadlines, organized chaos. I bought this house with honest money, brick by brick, dream by dream. I thought I'd spend my later years tending flowers and baking pies, not hiding bruises under sleeves and lies. I stared at the foundation bottle sitting on the counter, glossy, elegant, silent, and realized it was a gift meant to erase me. But as I held it, something inside me cracked. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that burns away fear until all that's left is resolve. I don't know what I'll do tomorrow, or the day after, but I know one thing. Last night changed something in me. The woman I see in that reflection, she's not done yet. She's bruised, yes. Broken, no. And for the first time in years, I whispered a promise to myself under my breath. This ends soon, because monsters don't always live in the dark, and sometimes, the only way to survive them is to turn on the light. Morning used to mean peace to me. The smell of coffee, the slow hum of the radio, sunlight crawling across the tablecloth. Now it means silence, the kind that hums just before thunder. I can tell what kind of day it will be by the way Ethan folds his napkin. When he does it sharply, like cutting paper, I know I must measure every breath. He sits there in his immaculate gray suit, scrolling on his phone. The world reflected in his polished watch. His hair perfect, his voice steady. No trace of the man who threw soup at my face last night. Sometimes I wonder if I dreamed it, if the bruise on my cheek is a trick of the light. But then I catch his eyes flat, assessing, and I know I didn't dream anything. I survived it. I set his plate before him. Scrambled eggs, toast, black coffee. The ritual never changes. Each movement rehearsed 1,000 times. I pour the coffee halfway, never full. He hates when it spills over. I place the butter on the left, knife facing outward. He says it's proper, and while he eats, I stand. I don't sit until he leaves. I tell myself it's out of respect, but it's fear wearing manners as perfume. He doesn't thank me. He never does. Instead, between bites, he lists the day's expectations like orders given to an employee. Savannah is hosting friends for lunch. He wants seafood. Real seafood, not frozen. Make it elegant, Mom, he says without looking at me. You know Savannah has standards. The way he says standards means I will make you pay if she's disappointed. When he finishes, he wipes his mouth carefully, then slides three $20 bills across the table. $60. That should cover lunch, he says. His generosity tastes like mockery. I nod, murmuring thank you, and he smirks because he knows I don't mean it. He knows I can't protest. Every cent of my pension, every piece of my independence, sits in an account under his control. I am an employee without a salary, a mother on probation. He checks his watch. Savannah will be here soon, he says, tightening his tie. Wear something decent today, and put on the makeup I gave you. You look tired. The word tired drips from his tongue like an insult. He doesn't mean exhausted, he means old, faded, embarrassing. I want to tell him he's the reason I'm tired, but my voice has learned to stay small. The key turns in the lock, and the house changes temperature. Savannah walks in, perfume first, her heels tapping like a metronome that sets the rhythm of my humiliation. She smiles at Ethan, then glances at me with that polite pity she thinks hides her disdain. Good morning, Mrs. Davis. How are you? I answer automatically. Fine, dear. The same lie, polished from repetition. The words taste like chalk. Ethan stands to kiss her cheek. You look beautiful, he says, his tone softer, practiced. For her, he becomes another man, charming, considerate. He even laughs a sound I haven't heard in years unless it's at my expense. Mom's making your favorite today, he adds, looking at me with that warning glint. She always takes good care of us. Savannah beams, believing him. I almost envy her ignorance. Almost. They sit together at the table, to actors in a perfect morning scene. I watch them, invisible, clearing dishes that aren't dirty just to stay moving. If I stop, if I breathe too long, I might start crying. And crying is dangerous. It ruins the illusion. Savannah's laughter fills the room, delicate and false. I imagine what she would say if she saw what happens after she leaves. Would she help me? Or would she fix her makeup and pretend not to hear? I honestly don't know. When they finally leave for work, the sound of the door closing feels like air rushing back into my lungs. I collapse into the chair he just vacated, still warm from his presence, and I stare at the untouched corner of his toast. I want to eat it just to taste something that belongs to me, but I can't. Even crumbs in this house feel like theft. The clock ticks. The same clock that has watched me age, cook, clean, and hope. I think about how easily he switches masks, how in one moment he's the loving son in public, the successful businessman, the dutiful husband, and then, behind closed doors, he's the judge, the jury, the punishment. He's careful, always careful. Every bruise where a sleeve can hide. Every threat whispered, never written. He controls not just the money, but the story. The narrative that paints me as unstable. The words he's planted in people's ears. She's getting forgetful. She's emotional. She's losing touch. That's how abuse works. It doesn't start with fists. It starts with stories. Lies told softly until everyone, even the victim, begins to believe them. I get up and start cleaning again, though the kitchen is spotless. It's the only thing I can control. I scrub the counter until my hands ache. I straighten the chairs, align the salt and pepper shakers, fold the napkins. I think about my life as if it were one of the firm's files, organized, labeled, waiting for someone to read it and understand the case. But no one reads a mother's file. No one investigates the quiet bruises or the bank withdrawals disguised as help. I am evidence with no witness. Through the window, I see the neighbors walking their dogs, starting their mornings. They wave. I smile back, pretending my life smells like coffee and not fear. Sometimes I imagine opening the window and shouting, "Help me." But the words never make it past my teeth. Because part of me still hopes Ethan will change. Because part of me still sees the 8-year-old boy who used to bring me wildflowers and call me Supermom. That part of me keeps me prisoner more than the locks or the threats ever could. The foundation bottle sits on the counter, catching the sunlight. I pick it up and study it. The shade is too light for my skin, almost ghostly. Maybe that's the point. Maybe he wants me invisible. I twist the cap open and, for a moment, consider throwing it away. But I don't. I place it back carefully, because rebellion must be planned in silence. I'm not ready yet. Not today. But I can feel the shift inside me, slow and sure, like water rising behind a dam. For years, I thought fear kept me safe. Now I realize fear keeps me still, and stillness is exactly what he wants. So I breathe, just once, deeply, and whisper to the empty room, "Not forever." Then I start the list for lunch, checking ingredients, prices, possibilities. Because survival, like revenge, begins with preparation. And somewhere between the eggshells and the grocery list, the thought forms clear and steady. If he can plan destruction, so can I. 3 years ago, the night he came back home, it was raining. I remember the sound of his suitcase wheels dragging across the porch, the way the porch light fell across his face. He looked lost, soaked, fragile in a way that pierced my heart. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking, "can I stay here for a while? Just until I get back on my feet." I didn't hesitate. I opened the door wide, letting in the rain and the trouble that followed it. He hugged me, and I felt the same warmth I'd known when he was a boy, small, scared, needing me. That night, I thought I was saving my son. I didn't know I was inviting my captor. At first, it was nice. He'd help around the house. We'd eat dinner together. We even laughed sometimes, the kind of laughter that comes when you both pretend the past didn't happen. I told my friends, it's good to have him home again. Divorce hit him hard. Poor thing. I believed that. I believed every story he told about how his ex-wife ruined him, how she drained his bank account, how she broke his heart. I wanted to believe he was still my little boy, just unlucky, just hurt. I never once imagined that maybe she left for the same reason I should have. In the beginning, he'd hand me cash for groceries. "I'll pay, Mom. You're retired now." He'd compliment my cooking, bring flowers from the corner store. He even fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom. It all looked so normal that I ignored the first signs, small comments that didn't sound like him. "You shouldn't wear those old dresses, Mom. They make you look tired." Or, "You're forgetting things lately. Are you sure you took your pills?" Little cracks that, at first, I smoothed over with love. Because that's what mothers do. We excuse, we soften, we believe. Then came the money. "You shouldn't handle cash anymore," he said one morning over coffee. "There are scams everywhere. Let me help with your pension. I'll manage it for you. Just for a while." His tone was calm, logical, protective. He used the same voice he used to ask for cookies when he was a boy. And I fell for it. I handed him the bank papers, the passwords, the numbers. It's just temporary, I told myself. He's good with finances. He's only trying to help. It didn't feel like losing control. It felt like love disguised as convenience. A few weeks later, he started controlling small things, which bills I could pay, how much I could spend on groceries, what I should save. If I bought something without asking, he'd frown. You need to be more responsible, Mom, he'd say. You're not young anymore. The way he said responsible made me feel like a child caught sneaking candy. Eventually, I stopped buying anything at all. The money I had worked 40 years for slipped quietly into his hands. He began to correct me, too. Not just my spending, but my speech, my movements. Don't slouch. Don't interrupt. Don't talk so much when people visit. He said it with a smile, but his eyes were sharp, waiting for mistakes. At first, I thought it was tension from the divorce. But tension doesn't watch you like prey. Tension doesn't measure how many minutes you talk before it cuts you off. 6 months after he moved in, I realized he was giving me an allowance, $20 a week. For your personal things, he said, as if I were a teenager earning pocket money. When I asked what he was doing with the rest of my pension, he smiled. Investing it for you, Mom. I'm growing your savings. I wanted to believe him. I needed to, because the alternative, that my own son was stealing from me, was too painful to imagine. Then came Savannah, the young woman with perfect hair and eyes that could sell anything. He met her at work, he said, in the marketing department. I remember the first time she came to dinner. She complimented the food, told me how lucky Ethan was to have such a wonderful mother. Her words were sweet, but her tone wasn't. There was something underneath. Amusement, superiority, the kind of pity people have for pets in cages. I tried to like her. I even prayed for her happiness. But deep down, I felt a cold draft the moment she entered our lives. When they got married 6 months later, I wasn't invited. It was a small ceremony, Ethan said afterward. Just close friends. I smiled and congratulated him, pretending it didn't sting. Pretending I didn't notice that my money had bought the rings, the venue, the honeymoon. I told myself it was fine. That's what mothers do. I said out loud in the kitchen that night. We give. But what I didn't realize was that every gift, every check I signed, was a piece of my freedom. After Savannah moved in, everything changed faster. Suddenly, my house had new rules. Mom, don't leave your shoes near the door. It looks messy. Mom, use the guest bathroom. Ours is private. Mom, could you wash this shirt by hand? It's too delicate for the machine. My home stopped being mine. I became a helper in the background of their perfect life. I cooked their dinners, cleaned their rooms, folded their laundry. They called it helping, but it wasn't help. It was service. It was submission disguised as love. And then came the violence. It didn't start with fists. It started with sighs, with slammed doors, with the sound of his voice rising 1 octave to high. The first time he pushed me, he called it an accident. The second time, he said it was my fault for getting in the way. By the time he slapped me, I had stopped defending myself. I'd learned that arguing only made him angrier. Silence became my shield and my prison. The day he threw the soup, I understood what these 3 years had really been. A slow erasure. Bit by bit, he had taken everything. My money, my house, my pride, my voice, until there was nothing left but the shadow of a woman he could control. I used to think monsters appeared in childhood stories to frighten us into obedience. Now I know the truth. The real ones grow up in your arms. You feed them, teach them, protect them, until one day, they look at you not with love, but ownership. That night, as I lay in bed, the rain started again. It sounded exactly like the night he first knocked on my door, and I wondered if maybe, in some cruel twist of fate, I had opened the same door twice, once to let him in, and once to let myself disappear. Tuesday is our light dinner night. It's a rule I made years ago when life was quieter. Something simple, something gentle. I chose vegetable soup because it used to mean comfort in this house. Carrots softened like small suns, celery sliced thin, potatoes in modest cubes. Onions sweated down until the kitchen smelled the way it used to on winter evenings, safe, warm, human. I toasted bread and rubbed a clove of garlic over it, the way my mother taught me, believing that a memory could season a room. I set the table carefully, the good bowls with the blue rim, the linen napkins with a faint iron crease, the crystal water glasses I swore I'd save for company. Maybe I hoped that if the table looked like love, the people sitting at it would remember how to be human. I ladled the soup, steam lifting softly, and placed the bread in a basket lined with a towel, so it would stay warm long enough to feel like welcome. My hands shook, but I pretended it was from the heat. The front door opened with that familiar click. Ethan didn't greet me. He tossed his keys in the bowl by the entryway, a hard, impatient clatter, and walked straight to the table without looking at my face. He sat, tugged at his tie, and picked up the spoon. The first sip lasted 2 seconds. The second lasted none. He spat into the bowl as if the soup had insulted him. The sound was wet, indecent, final. Then he lifted his eyes. "What is this?" The words were low but heavy, like a drawer pulled too far. "What is this supposed to be?" "It's vegetable soup," I said, steadying my voice with both hands on the back of a chair. "I must have forgotten the salt. I'll add." He stood, not quickly, not with fury, with ceremony, as if the verdict needed a stage. He picked up the bowl, and for half a second I thought he might walk it to the stove, that we would fix the evening like we used to fix small mistakes. Instead, the bowl flew an arc of white porcelain and hot gold. It hit the wall behind me, above my left shoulder. Heat splashed my cheek and temple. I felt the sting before I heard the shatter. Shards rained like hard rain. One sliced my lip open with the neatness of a paper cut. The room went silent except for the slow drip of broth sliding down the paint. "You're useless," he said, his voice no longer low. 40 years as a secretary and you can't salt soup." He grabbed my forearm. His fingers were iron. I could already see tomorrow's bruises blooming there, purple flowers of warning. He dragged me a step forward, not enough to knock me down, just enough to remind me he could. "Look at me when I talk to you." I did. His eyes were glassy with a kind of contempt that doesn't have air in it. "I come home after working all day, and this," he gestured to the wall, to my face, to the floor. "This is what you give me." "I can fix it," I whispered. "Let me." He shoved me. Not a push, a punctuation mark. My shoulder met the wall corner, a sharp kiss of pain that made the edges of the room blur. Stars pricked at the corners of my vision. When I steadied, he slapped me. One clean, practiced motion. The sound was flat, embarrassing. My ear rang, then hummed, the way a fluorescent light does when it's about to die. "Savannah is bringing her friends tomorrow," he said, as if reading a calendar, as if this was a normal conversation about scheduling. "You will cook something proper, a pasta, seafood, Caesar salad, dessert, and you will make me proud." He leaned in, and his breath smelled like peppermint and victory. If you embarrass me, if you look like this, if you make them think I don't take care of my mother. He tapped my cheek with 2 fingers, a gesture that mimicked tenderness, mocked it. I will kick you out. I don't care what the deed says. I understand, I said, because the body learns to say what keeps it standing upright. He went quiet then. He looked at the wall, at the dripping broth, at the shards glittering on the floor like a broken night. He exhaled, as though the storm had cleared. He reached for a napkin, stepped closer, and wiped the blood from the corner of my mouth with the same care a father uses to clean ice cream from a toddler's chin. I'm sorry, Mom, he murmured, his voice softened to a rehearsal of remorse. You know I get frustrated. You can do better. You always said you wanted me to be the best. The words were bomb poured over a burn while the fire still licked the edges. He left the napkin on the table, a small white flag stained pink, and walked upstairs to bed. The floorboards complained under his weight, then calmed. A door clicked shut. The house pretended to breathe again. I didn't sit. I didn't cry. I picked up the broom and began with the large pieces, the ones that catch the light and your eye. Then I swept the tiny glitter that bites the soles if you miss it. I wiped the broth trails down the wall long, lazy commas that refused to end the sentence. I changed the towel in the bread basket because it had caught a splash. I ran cool water over my cheek and watched the skin there blush angry. The cut on my lip was small, but it stung every time I swallowed. I pressed a folded paper towel against it and waited until the red slowed to a whisper. Every small movement felt like a choice. Clean or collapse. I chose cleaning because collapsing would wake him, and waking him would feed the storm. I moved through the kitchen the way women in my family have always moved through pain, quietly, efficiently, as if efficiency could be a spell. The clock above the doorway ticked its steady metronome. The soup on the stove cooled without salt, a silent witness that would not defend me. When the last shard was gone, I took the trash bag to the bin and stood in the dark yard for a breath. That wasn't portioned out to someone else. Across the hedge, Claris's porch light glowed. I could see the shape of her in the window, her head bent over a book, the outline of a life that looked soft. I almost knocked. I almost pressed my bruised cheek to her kind shoulder and said the words that choke me. Help me. Instead, I watched the moths bump the light like tiny, stubborn hearts and told myself tomorrow would be easier if tonight stayed quiet. Back inside, I mopped the place where I'd bled. I wiped the counter again, though it was already clean. I put the good bowls back in the cabinet, embarrassed to have asked them to witness this. Then I washed my face and saw the mask Ethan had purchased for me, a foundation bottle, promising invisibility. I didn't open it. I touched the lid with 2 fingers, like a prayer postponed. On the way to bed, I paused at his door. Not close, far enough to hear the rise and fall of a sleep that sounded like a satisfied animal. I remembered the boy whose chest used to lift the same way after a day in the sun, sandy-haired and bonfire-smelling, the boy who once held a paper cup of lemonade out to me like an offering. I stood there until the memory let go of me. In my room, I lay down on top of the covers. I didn't undress. I needed to be ready for footsteps, for a door that opens too quickly, for a voice that says my name wrong. Sleep didn't come. Instead, I counted breaths. I counted the things I still owned that didn't have his fingerprints on them. My name, my hands, my will. I pressed my palm to the tender bloom on my arm and thought, this is a line, not a crack to plaster over. A line you step across, one time, and something in you won't ever step back. By morning, the wall was clean, the floor shining, the bowls stacked as if dinner had been kind. There was no evidence left, except the bruise map written in dark ink under my skin and the cut that tugged every time I tried to smile. Abuse is loyal to the places no one checks. I brewed coffee and stood at the sink while the first thin light climbed the backyard fence. Somewhere a dog barked. Somewhere a bus sighed. The day began like a machine turning on. I pressed my fingertips to the windowsill and felt the wood, smooth from years of being touched by women trying to steady themselves. And there, in the ordinary morning, I understood what last night really did. It emptied the room of excuses. It took my hope that being good enough would save me and threw it against the wall. It left me with the one thing you can build a life on when all the pretty lies are gone: clarity. Salt can fix a soup. It cannot fix a man who enjoys watching you flinch. By noon the house looked like a page I had ironed flat. The table wore its best, the white cloth I saved for holidays, the china with the thin gold ring that makes everything look like ceremony, the crystal glasses that catch the light like secrets trying to be seen. I set knives and forks as if laws could be made out of silver. In the oven, the bread warmed. On the stove, sauce simmered with the quiet patience I wish I still had. I checked the mirror and pulled the collar a little higher. Foundation did its quiet work. The bruise on my cheek looked more like tiredness now. The cut on my lip like chapped weather. If you didn't know me, you might not see it. If you loved me, you couldn't miss it. At exactly 12, the bell sang. I wiped my hands on the dish towel and opened the door to Savannah, standing like an advertisement in yellow fitted dress, sleek hair, the confidence of someone who has never had to apologize for existing. Behind her, 3 women who smelled like office air and new leather. Mrs. Davis, Savannah said in her company voice, bright and smooth. Let me introduce you. She pointed like a tour guide. Beatrice, Human Resources. Brenda, Marketing. And Evelyn from Legal. Evelyn. The name hit the back of my throat like a swallowed cry. She stepped forward, polite, composed, her eyes searching my face the way a lighthouse searches water. 2 years of silence sat between us like a table no one dared to set. We had not spoken since an argument that feels childish now, since busy lives and old pride did what distance alone cannot. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Davis, she said in a voice that performed ignorance perfectly. Not Monica. Not Sister Mrs. Davis. I understood immediately. We were playing a part for the room. Come in, I said, and my voice didn't break. Lunch is ready. I heard my own words and wanted to laugh at how domestic survival sounds. Lunch is ready. As if nourishment could be served over a throat full of fear. They praised the house the way people do when they notice expensive things, polite, impressed, incurious. They sat, slender phones face down by their plates like sleeping snakes. I poured wine. Not the good stuff Ethan demanded, but a bottle that pretends well. The shrimp pasta had come out better than my math predicted. The salad wore its dressing lightly. Beatrice said, "This looks wonderful." And Brenda added, "You're such a devoted mother-in-law." Words meant as compliments can work like little knives. Savannah preened under their approval, ranging her napkin like a small silk flag. Mrs. Davis takes care of everything, she said with a smile that didn't touch me. It's like having a housekeeper, but better she does it with love. The sentence found the bruise under my makeup and pressed. I smiled, the kind of smile you use to stop a cut from opening. All through the first course, Evelyn watched without staring. She has lawyer's eyes trained to catch what others don't see and to pretend she didn't. When I placed the bread, her gaze lingered a second too long on the edge of my collarbone where the makeup couldn't quite win. She took a sip of water and said nothing, but silence, in the right hands, is a message. I moved like a moon around their little planetary filling, clearing, appearing with the next dish before anyone could wonder if I belonged at the table. That is the trick of certain kinds of womanhood. You become the heir, necessary and invisible. The conversation turned to office politics. Deals 1. A rival firm's clumsy lawsuit. Savannah laughed easily. The way people laugh when they know they are defended by money and by men who make phones ring for them. My name floated in and out of sentences as a function. Mrs. Davis. More wine, please. Mrs. Davis. This is lovely. It felt like being summoned by title in a life I bought. Between plates, Evelyn asked a question that sounded simple and landed heavy. And what did you do before you retired, Mrs. Davis? You have such a poised way about you. The room stilled a breath. Savannah's smile tightened like a seam. I placed the dessert spoons down 1, 2, 3, 4 and answered. I worked 40 years as an executive secretary at Sullivan and Associates. I let the name sit. Beatrice nodded politely, not recognizing it. Brenda's eyebrows lifted a fraction. Evelyn's eyes warmed with a small memory we both kept the day I bought this house. With paperwork in my purse and pride too big to carry. 40 years, Evelyn said, impressed like a judge more than a guest. That must have been significant. I allowed myself to be tall for one sentence. It was, I said. The work mattered. The details matter. I was good at them. For a heartbeat, the woman I used to be stepped into the room and adjusted the light. Savannah interrupted with a bright correction. But now Mom is enjoying her well-deserved rest, she said, placing her hand over mine without actually touching. Ethan takes care of everything, her finances, her needs. He's such a responsible son. The word responsible arrived with a shadow. Evelyn shifted, almost imperceptibly. She had heard it to the rehearsed line, the legal angle, the plot point disguised as kindness. She looked at me, and this time did not hide the question in her eyes. Are you safe? I brought out dessert tiramisu in small glass cups, which makes everything look gentler than it is. The conversation loosened. The room softened with sugar. I almost forgot to be afraid, almost. Then the front door opened without warning. Ethan's footsteps were sunshine that burns. He walked in wearing his best smile. The one with all his teeth, the one that makes strangers like him. Ladies, he said, how are the most brilliant minds in the office today? He kissed Savannah, then let his hand land on my shoulder heavy, claiming, Mom's the secret to all this, he announced. She lives to take care of us. His fingers tightened a fraction. A message in pressure. Remember who owns the lines in this play. I stood still. I have learned that even flinching can be read as disrespect. They thanked me for the meal. Compliments piled up like folded linens, neat, unused. Beatrice said, You're charming, Mrs. Davis, and Brenda echoed, Truly delightful. Savannah glowed in their borrowed light. She gathered her friends and, as they filtered toward the door, Evelyn fell behind the flow. For a second we were alone in the hallway. The space between our breaths, the only private thing left in the house. May I help with the dishes? She asked, too casually, as if she'd ever had to ask me that in her life. I shook my head. Everything's under control, I said, because control was the one thing I did not have, and the one thing I could name without crying. She lowered her voice a whisper's width. Monica, she said my name, at last, like a key pressed into my hand. Are you? The front door opened wider. Ethan's shadow crossed the floor. I stepped back into the kitchen of my role. Thank you for coming, I said at normal volume. It was lovely to see you. At the threshold, Evelyn extended her hand like a stranger. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Davis," she said for the audience, then leaned in just close enough that perfume could hide the truth. "We'll see each other soon," she whispered into my ear, voice steady the way bridges are built. I didn't nod. I didn't dare. But my ribs made space for the words and kept them like heat. When the door closed, the house lost 20 degrees. Ethan's smile fell from his face like a mask dropped after a show. "You did well," he said, which is what he says when I have met the standard for not being punished. Praise as leash. I collected plates. I stacked glasses. I ranged forks so their tines all faced the same way because order is a kind of prayer. On the counter, a smear of cocoa from the tiramisu looked like a fingerprint. I wiped it with the same care I used to erase parts of myself that don't fit his version. Sometime after the sink was empty and the dishwasher hummed like a low, forgiving choir, there was a soft knock at the back door. I froze. He was upstairs, the TV telling jokes to itself. I dried my hands and lifted the curtain with 2 fingers. Clarice stood there, her cardigan pulled tight, her face drawn with worry that didn't perform. Her other hand held a small container stew, probably because she's the kind of woman who brings food when she brings concern. I opened the door and she slipped inside like Mercy. "I heard voices earlier," she whispered, glancing up the stairs. "And I saw you at the store this morning. Your lip." She didn't finish the sentence because decent people don't narrate your injuries to you. "I made too much," she said, lifting the container an inch. "I thought you might want some." We stood in the blue light of the kitchen like conspirators, 2 women whose lives overlap at the hedge and, suddenly, in the truth. I wanted to pour everything out in one rush: the soup, the threats, the bank account, the bruise blooming under the makeup. Instead, I said the smallest true thing. "Thank you." She nodded, understanding the size of that word in a house like mine. She set the stew on the counter and reached for my wrist, not to examine, not to pry, just to anchor. "If you ever need anything," she said, and the sentence was warm with promise, not pity, "I'm home most afternoons. Knock twice if you don't want to talk at the door. I'll understand." She held my gaze to be sure the message landed. It did. It landed and lit. After she left, I stood very still. Upstairs, I heard the rise and fall of Ken laughter. In my chest, something else rose and fell, hope, so small I almost mistook it for air. In one afternoon, 2 women had seen me. One through blood, one through law. Clarice had offered cover. Evelyn had offered code. Between them, a bridge began to draw itself across the water I kept drowning in. I washed the last glass and set it upside down to dry. The kitchen was clean enough to pass anyone's inspection. But when I turned off the light, I didn't feel invisible. Not entirely. Sometimes freedom begins as a knock you barely hear, as a whispered soon, as a stew on your counter that means stay alive one more night. Sometimes the heroic thing isn't leaving, it's letting yourself be seen. And for the first time in a very long time, I let myself believe that being seen might be safer than being silent. At 11:30, while I was still rinsing the last dessert plates, the phone rang. The sound cut through the quiet like something foreign, like a sound not meant for this house. I dried my hands on my apron and answered, double quotes, "Mrs. Davis." "Yes. This is Adrienne Castillo from Northern Business Corporation, your son's company. We need to speak with you urgently regarding some discrepancies in your bank account." The words "your bank account" froze the air between us. My fingers tightened on the receiver. "There must be a mistake," I said. "I don't handle my accounts, my son does." "That's precisely why we need you to come in," he replied, his voice steady, polite in a way that meant serious. Could you come to the office this afternoon? Say, 3 o'clock. My heart began a slow, heavy drum. Ethan had left for work an hour ago. Savannah was gone, too. I could have said no. I could have waited. But something in his tone, something that felt like truth, made me say yes. I'll be there, I whispered. I hung up and stood still for a long time, the silence thick as fog. I didn't even notice the clock ticking until it startled me back into motion. Discrepancies. The word sounded clinical, almost harmless. But I'd worked 40 years in an office. I knew what it meant when an accountant used that tone. It meant something had gone very wrong, and someone had been caught. I spent the next hour pretending to clean, but my hands moved without purpose. My mind raced ahead to what I didn't want to see. I remembered the transfers, the way Ethan would come home and say, "I moved your money for you, Mom. It's better this way." I remembered how he said it with the same voice he used to tell me bedtime stories when he was little. Calm, reassuring, practiced. And suddenly I wondered if every bedtime story had been rehearsal for this. At 2 o'clock, I changed my clothes. A pale blue blouse, dark trousers, my old leather bag from the law firm days. I looked at myself in the mirror. My lip was still healing, but the foundation hid the worst. "You look presentable," I told my reflection. I didn't look presentable. I looked like someone trying to remember who she was before she forgot how to say no. The bus ride downtown was slow. The city looked almost kind from the window. People walking dogs, kids in uniforms, lives that didn't feel borrowed. When I stepped off the bus, the skyscraper loomed over me like judgment. All glass and reflection, no mercy. Northern Business Corporation gleamed in silver letters above the doors. I thought of Ethan walking through those doors every morning, his suit pressed, his lies ironed smooth. Inside, the lobby smelled of expensive coffee and air conditioning. A young receptionist smiled at me, the kind of smile people reserve for grandmothers they assume are lost. "Can I help you, Mum? I'm here to see Mr. Castillo," I said. Floor 18. The elevator ride felt eternal. My heart kept time with each passing floor. 10, 11, 12. The reflection in the metal walls showed a woman trying to hold her dignity in trembling hands. When the doors opened, a man in his 50s with neat glasses and tired eyes greeted me. "Mrs. Davis, I'm Adrienne Castillo. Please, come in." His office smelled like ink and tension. Files were spread across the desk, papers clipped and lined like evidence. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to a chair. I sat. He folded his hands. "I'll get straight to the point. Over the last 6 months, we've discovered several irregular transfers from company funds. The money was routed through your son's account, then transferred into yours." For a moment, the words didn't land. It was as if he'd spoken a foreign language. "That's impossible," I said, shaking my head. "I don't handle any transfers. Ethan manages my pension. That's all." "I believe you," Adrienne said gently. "That's why we reached out before taking legal steps. But the documents are clear." He turned a folder toward me. Lines of numbers, dates, bank stamps, $50,000. My name on every transaction. I stared at the papers. My name looked strange, like it belonged to someone else. My throat tightened. "I didn't know," I whispered. "I'm sure you didn't," he said. "But the law doesn't see ignorance. The law sees signatures and account numbers." My eyes blurred. "So, what happens now?" He sighed. "You can help us. File a formal complaint stating that your son misused your account. That will clear you legally. Without it, you risk being considered an accomplice, Accomplice. The word hit harder than any slap Ethan had ever given me. My son, I said, the syllables breaking apart. He did this? Adrienne looked at me for a long moment. I'm sorry, Mrs. Davis. I've seen many cases like this, but rarely this calculated. It seems he used your account to hide the stolen funds. I felt dizzy. The office tilted. For years I had lived in the nightmare of his temper. Now I saw the other monster his mind. Cold, deliberate, meticulous. I had thought I was being punished by a broken man. But Ethan wasn't broken. He was building something on my back, with my name. I nodded slowly, though my heart was a storm. I'll file the complaint. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded like someone finally giving testimony in her own trial. Adrienne slid the forms across the desk. My hands trembled as I signed. Each letter felt like cutting an invisible thread. When it was done, he looked relieved. This is the right thing, he said softly. You're doing the brave thing. Brave. I almost laughed. Brave was what people called you when you had already lost everything worth protecting. Outside, the sunlight was too bright, the street too loud. I walked without direction, the city moving around me like a river. I passed a shop window and saw my reflection. I didn't look like a mother anymore. I looked like evidence. I wandered until my legs ached, then finally caught the bus home. Every stop felt like a countdown. By the time I reached my street, dusk was falling. The porch light was on. Ethan's car was in the driveway. My stomach turned to glass. He was waiting when I opened the door, sitting on the couch, the TV glowing in front of him. Where were you? He asked. I went for a walk. A walk. His voice sharpened. To the company. I froze. He knew. He always knew. They called me, I said carefully, about some confusion. What did you tell them? The truth. He stood slowly, the smile fading. And what's the truth, Mom? That you stole from them. That you used my account. For the first time, I saw it, the flicker of fear behind his rage. It was small, but it was there. You're confused, he said, the old manipulation sliding back into place. You're tired. You're not well. No one will believe you. Adrienne believed me, I said quietly. He has the documents. The silence that followed was the longest I've ever lived inside. Then, with a calm that chilled me more than shouting ever had, he said, if you open your mouth again, I'll destroy you. He walked toward me slowly, his voice smooth, rehearsed. This house is half mine. Your money is mine. Your name, your reputation, it's all tied to me. If I fall, you fall. I didn't answer. I couldn't. But something in me, something small and stubborn, didn't shatter this time. His threats hit, but didn't stick. Because I knew something he didn't. Fear has an expiration date. That night, when the house fell silent again, I sat in the dark and whispered to the empty air, you've taken everything, Ethan, but you won't take the ending. And somewhere deep in that quiet, I started to plan. Dusk draped itself over the living room like a heavy coat. Ethan sat on the couch, shoes off, tie loosened, the TV laughing for both of us. When I closed the door behind me, he muted the screen with one thumb and tilted his head. That small, practiced movement he uses to make me feel smaller. Where were you? He asked, voice casual, eyes not. Out, I said, setting my bag down with care. Walking. A long walk. He smiled without teeth. To the 18th floor. Silence is a glass you can see through and still cut yourself on. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. His smile thinned. What did you tell them, Mom? The truth, I said. The word felt like a stone I finally let drop. About the transfers. About my account. About the money that isn't yours. He stood, slow as a curtain rising. You're confused. I'm tired, I corrected. There's a difference. He took one step. The room shrank. Listen to me carefully. His voice softened into the pitch he uses when he's about to hurt me. No one will believe you. You've been forgetful. Even Savannah's noticed. He gestured vaguely toward the staircase, toward a life that pretends to live there. And this house is also in my name. If you embarrass me, I'll put you on the street before morning. I looked at the carpet we chose together 12 years ago, at the coffee table I paid for, at the frame with a picture of a boy with sunburned nose and lemonade grin. The accountant believes me, I said, and the documents don't forget. For a beat, his face flickered fear showing like a fish breaking the surface. Then it was gone. He closed the space between us and gripped my forearm, the same place he always claims, fingers finding the bruise like they had coordinates. If you open your mouth again, he whispered, breath warm with peppermint, I will have you declared incompetent. I know doctors. I know how to make papers say what I want. You'll sign power of attorney. And this, his eyes swept the room, the house. My life will finally be mine without your whining. Let go, I said, and the voice that came out was not a whisper. It was the voice I used to book courtrooms and move calendars that moved people. He was so surprised he loosened his grip. I didn't step back. I was tired of stepping back. His laugh was quiet and wrong. You're brave tonight. No, I said. I'm clear. He moved past me to the entryway table, picked up my old laptop, the one I used to order groceries, and turned it in his hands like evidence. By the way, a technician's coming tomorrow to check your computer. Seems you've been visiting strange websites, support groups, shelters. He clicked his tongue. That's not very loyal, Mom. My blood ran cold and hot at once. He knew I'd been searching for help. He knew, because he watches all the doors, even the ones that are supposed to be inside me. Tomorrow, he said, laying the laptop down as if it were a patient. We're going to the bank at 10. You'll tell them you authorized every transfer. You'll smile. You'll apologize for the confusion, and you'll sign what they put in front of you. His gaze sharpened. Do you understand? The old answer rose to my lips, yes. Of course. Anything to make it stop. I swallowed it like a pill that never worked. No, I said. The room froze around that word. A small word, a small match. But the right small thing can burn a field. No, he repeated, slowly, tasting it like something he planned to spit out. Say that again. I'm not signing anything. He smiled, a new smile, calm, smooth, terrifying. If that's how you want to play, we'll play. He walked to the bookshelf and straightened a frame with the gentleness he reserves for breaking. When I'm finished with you, you'll wish you were never born. The doorbell rang. It was a soft sound, but it split the moment. He lowered his hand. His rage needs privacy the way mold needs dark. Go see who it is, he said through his teeth. And you'd better not say anything strange. My legs shook as I crossed the hall. I opened the door to Clarice, cardigan pulled tight, eyes alert. She held a casserole dish like a reason. Hello, dear, she said louder than necessary. I brought stew. I heard voices. Over her shoulder stood another woman in casual clothes, hair tied back, Evelyn. My sister. She smiled like a stranger and lifted a small shopping bag. I'm new to the neighborhood, she added, projecting her voice past me. Just dropping this off for Mrs. Davis. Ethan appeared behind me, the performance back on his face. No trouble at all, he said brightly. Mom got a little worked up. Burned dinner. You know how older women get. Clarice held his gaze a beat longer than polite. Right, she said softly. Then to me, she added with a warmth that could heat a house. If you need anything, I'm right next door. Day or night. Evelyn stepped closer, shook my hand for the audience, and leaned in just enough to breathe a whisper against my ear. Soon, she said, a single word, a door on a hinge. When they left, the mask fell again. He shut the door with his palm. Not a slam, just enough to tell the wood who owned it. Nosy old women, he muttered. This isn't over. Tomorrow, the bank. You'll fix what you broke. He paused, savoring the next line. Or I'll fix you. I'm not going to the bank, I said, surprised at how steady a person can be while shaking. His eyes went flat. Then sleep lightly. That night, he paced his room, his voice rising and falling through the ceiling in jagged lines. I lay on my bed with my shoes on, listening to every board creak like a warning. At 3 a.m, I heard a faint rustle outside my window, the kind of careful sound that belongs to someone who doesn't want to be seen. I pulled the curtain a sliver. In the hedges, a small red blinked on and settled, then disappeared beneath leaves. Clarice's silhouette moved like a shadow that knew the map. I didn't understand what she was doing. I only understood that she was doing it for me. Dawn came gray and thin. Ethan was up early, already pressed, already smiling. He poured himself coffee and sweetened his voice. I've been thinking, he said, buttering toast as if we were a family. Maybe I've been too hard on you. We'll clear up the misunderstanding today. You'll tell them you approved the transfers. We'll laugh about it. I set a cup down in front of him and watched his reflection tremble in the dark surface. I'm not going. His smile didn't reach his eyes. If you force my hand, I'll call the doctors. I'll call Savannah's friends. I'll call anyone I need to make your mind look broken. It isn't, I said, and for the first time, I believed myself more than I feared him. He leaned in. 10 o'clock, he said. Wear something decent. Put on the makeup. Cover the marks. He took his keys and walked out, and the house exhaled like a creature relieved of weight for now. I stood very still. My hands trembled, but not with helplessness, with adrenaline that had decided to be useful. The clock said 8:07. The back door knocked, twice, soft. I opened it to Clarice, hair uncombed, urgency plain. She slipped inside and closed the door with 2 fingers. Monica, she whispered. I heard everything. The threats, the bank. I set a camera last night by your window. It caught his words. All of them. I felt my knees want to forget their job. What do I do? We go now, she said, to the district attorney. My friend Brenda is on call this morning. She handles cases like this. We can get ahead of him. I looked toward the hall, toward the stairs, toward the door my son would darken at 9:30. This was the choice, not between fear and bravery, between silence and evidence, between the story he writes and the one I sign. I grabbed my purse and the folder Adrienne had given me. On my way out, I paused and touched the foundation bottle with 2 fingers, the ritual I'd invented to keep from disappearing. I won't need you today, I told it, and left it standing in the light. Outside, the air tasted like rain that hadn't decided yet. Clarice's car hummed awake. We pulled away from the curb, and the house grew small in the rear view. For 3 years, I had been leaving in my head and returning with groceries. This time, I left with a witness. Somewhere between my street and the courthouse, my fear loosened its hands from my throat. Not because danger was gone, but because, for once, It wasn't the only thing in the car with me. Evidence sat between us like a quiet, loyal friend. And I realized the truth that abusers are right to fear. Once a woman has proof, she has a future. The district attorney's building doesn't look like justice. It looks like paperwork. Beige walls, buzzing lights, the kind of chairs that make you sit up straight and regret every heavy thought you brought with you. Clarice parked close to the entrance and killed the engine. For a moment we stayed in the car, the quiet between us full of two different kinds of courage. Hers, the kind that shows up for you. Mine, the kind that finally shows up for itself. Inside, the receptionist slid us sign-in forms while her nail polish dried in the air. Name, she asked without looking up. Monica Davis, I said, and my voice surprised me by not shaking. We're here to see Brenda Carver. The woman tilted her head toward a door at the end of the hall. She knows you're coming. Brenda met us in a navy blazer and sensible shoes. The kind of woman who knows where the bodies of bad habits are buried and how to unearth them without screaming. Mrs. Davis, she said, shaking my hand like a promise. Clarice filled me in. Let's sit. Her office smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and better days. On her desk, a legal pad waited, margin sharp, pen uncapped. Start from the beginning, she said. And I did soup, bruise, bank, threats, each piece placed carefully on the table of her attention, which never once looked away. Clarice slid a small black device across the desk. The camera, she said. I set it last night facing the kitchen window. It caught his threats this morning. The bank, the doctors, the power of attorney. Brenda connected it to her computer and pressed play. Ethan's voice spilled into the room, calm, clinical, cruel in the way that only sounds reasonable to the person saying it. We watched in silence. Brenda took notes in a narrow, fast hand. Every time Ethan said, "You'll regret it," or "No one will believe you," she underlined something I couldn't see. When the recording ended, she exhaled. All right, she said, practical as a clock. We have domestic abuse, intimidation, coercion, attempted financial control via power of attorney. Plus, if the company has already documented the embezzlement and the transfers to your account, we can tie his criminal exposure to your safety risk. My safety, I repeated softly, trying the phrase on like a coat I might be allowed to wear. What do? We put your story on paper and under oath, she said. We get a judge to sign an emergency protective order. We coordinate with the police to arrest him at a location we can control. She looked at the clock. You said he returns around 9:30. He left at 8, I said. He wanted the bank at 10. Good, she said. We'll be ahead of him. She slid a stack of forms toward me, affidavits, incident statements, consent to access my bank records. Legal words that meant, your story will be believed because it is written and witnessed. My hand hovered above the pen for a second. Signing was always his game, but this time the ink would not belong to him. I wrote my name in the places she pointed, slow and careful, like a woman learning to spell free. While I signed, Brenda called the police liaison. Her voice shifted a gear, warmth replaced by precision. We have a victim with credible recorded threats, she said. We need a unit at her residence by 10 o'clock. The suspect is likely to be agitated and controlling. Yes, we have corroboration from corporate accounting. She listened, tapped her pen twice, and nodded. Copy. We'll keep her here until you confirm. When the last page was signed, Brenda looked up and smiled, not a big smile, but the kind of small, fierce one people wear when a plan is finally taller than a fear. You did the hard part, she said. Now we let the infrastructure do its job. Infrastructure. I'd spent 3 years under one his. rules that changed to suit his mood, doors that only opened from his side. To hear that there existed a different structure, one built to hold me up instead of hold me in, made my throat tight. What happens to him? I asked. If all goes as it should, he'll be taken into custody today, she said. Then we move for a no-contact order. The company will press charges. You'll be listed as a protected witness. And we'll talk about your finances. We'll get you separate access again. I nodded. Thank you. 2 words that carried the weight of 3 years and a kitchen floor. 9:48. Brenda's phone buzzed. She answered, listened, and then covered the receiver with her hand. They're in position, she said. He's home. I tried to breathe normally. My lungs didn't know how to pull air that wasn't rationed by fear. Is he dangerous? The question sounded foolish. Of course he was, but quartz like the obvious on paper. Dangerous, manipulative, practiced, she said, but not invisible anymore. We waited. 10:06. 10:12. The second hand on the wall clock made laps like a runner who refuses to get tired. Finally, at 10:30, the call came. Brenda put it on speaker. Units on scene. Subject attempted to resist entry, yelling, breaking household items. We have him in cuffs. No injuries to officers. Scene secured. I didn't realize I was holding the chair until my fingers went numb from relief. Clarice touched my arm, the simple human gesture the last 3 years had starved me from. My eyes filled, not with pity for him, but with oxygen for me. Brendan nodded to the phone. Thank you, officer, she said. We'll bring the victim by later for property documentation. Victim, I repeated when she hung up. Not mother, not problem, not crazy old woman. Victim. It wasn't the only word I wanted to be, but it was a true one, and today I needed the truth to have a badge. We drove back to the house after the paperwork for the emergency order was filed. Clarice kept both hands on the wheel. You're not going in there alone, she said. Not today. Not any day until we say so. I nodded. The hedges waved in a wind I hadn't noticed. My porch light was still on from last night, a tired little star that hadn't given up. Inside, the living room looked like it had been argued with. Sofa cushions gutted, books slashed in piles. Picture frames shattered, a gallery of our faces in glass confetti. In the kitchen, cabinet doors hung open like mouths mid-scream. He had raged not at me, but at the things that remembered me. The cop snapping photos said, "We'll catalog damage for the report. It helps the judge see the pattern. The pattern: soup, bruise, threat, bank, lie, glass, cuffs." On the coffee table, his phone still buzzed with a life that didn't include me. Savannah's name flashed once, then again. A voicemail pinged another. Do I answer? I asked Brenda, who had met us there with a canvas tote full of forms. No, she said. Let the system catch up to his voice on its own. She walked me through the protective order. What it covered. What to do if he called. Where to go if fear knocked first. You're going to feel strange, she warned, eyes kind. Freedom feels like wrongness at first. Your brain will look for a cage, because it learned that cage meant safety. I nodded because I could already feel it, my body waiting for footsteps that weren't coming. My ears straining for a key in the door that would never turn again without permission. What if he makes bail? I asked. We'll fight that, she said. And even if he does, the order stands. One call, one word at your hedge, and he violates it. He goes back in. She glanced at Clarice. You keep that camera up. I will, Clarice said, a small general in a cardigan. When the officers finished, the house exhaled another layer of stale fear. Brenda handed me a card with her cell number. I'll check in tonight, she said. You don't have to sleep here. In fact, I'd prefer you didn't. Go with Clarice for a few days while we stabilize the legal side. I looked around at the ruin he made in minutes, the cushions, the frames, the halo of glass around the photograph of 8-year-old Ethan, with a paper crown from his birthday. I picked the photo up carefully, careful not to cut myself on the past. I loved this boy, I said, not to excuse the man, but to grieve the child who evaporated into him. You still can, Brenda said, from a distance that keeps you alive. We locked the door behind us. Clarice's house smelled like onions and rosemary and something else. Safety. She made tea because that's what women do when there's nothing else to do that won't break you. We sat at her small table while the kettle went mute. I wrapped my hands around the cup and waited for them to stop shaking. It's over, Clarice said softly, and I shook my head. No, it started. She understood. In the afternoon, the voicemail icon glowed on my phone, insistent as a heartbeat. Brenda glanced at it. We'll preserve those, she said. Don't listen yet. But I pressed play anyway because part of surviving is knowing the thing you're surviving. His voice poured out, first angry, then pleading, then wet with a child's kind of sorrow. Mom, please. It was a misunderstanding. I love you. Don't let me rot. Manipulation has many costumes. Today it wore regret. I deleted nothing. I saved it all. Evidence is not revenge. It's air. As evening slid down the windows, I borrowed one of Clarice's extra blankets and sat on her couch in a quiet that wasn't dangerous. The world outside continued like nothing monumental had happened. A dog barked, a toddler laughed, a car door shut. Inside, a woman relearned how to breathe without permission. I thought of the foundation bottle standing upright on my counter like a soldier guarding a lie. Tomorrow, I would go back and decide what to keep and what to throw away. But tonight, I kept only this. The sound of a lock that would not turn against me. The knowledge that somewhere downtown, a man who thought he authored me now had to ask to use a phone. Clarice came in with 2 bowls of stew and set one in my hands. Steam rose, carrying thyme and tenderness. Eat, she said. Tomorrow we'll ask for strength. I lifted the spoon and tasted something I hadn't tasted in years. Safety has a flavor. It tastes like food you aren't afraid to spill. It tastes like soup that doesn't need salt to remind you you're alive. Night in Clarice's house sounds different from mine. The pipes sigh softly. The fridge hum is kind, not nervous. I slept with the door cracked, a child's habit I had forgotten I owned. At dawn, I woke to the smell of coffee and the quiet knowledge that no one was timing my steps. Freedom is loud at first. It rattles the bones that learned to whisper. By mid-morning, the first letter arrived, cream envelope, jail postmark. My name in the handwriting I taught him when his hands were still sticky with jam. Clarice brought it to me on a little tray with tea, the way you bring a difficult truth. I slid it open with my thumb. Dear Mom, it began, sweet as arsenic. Enjoy your little victory. You think this is over, but you forgot who raised me. I learned from the best how to make papers behave. The words unspooled, each line tightening a wire around my chest. He wrote about my 40 years at Sullivan and Associates, about cases with names I had filed and dusted. Remember Williams v. The State? 15 years ago? I found the memos you organized. The ones you altered to help Mr. Sullivan win. Obstruction, Mom. My hands shook. A ghost rose. The partner's calm voice. Pull the duplicates. Clean the packet. Client confidentiality, Monica. I had believed it was clerical defense, not legal offense. I thought I was protecting order, not erasing truth. He went on. I've got photographs. I've got more than photographs. And then the knife with a smile. You always loved doing what was right. Do it again for me. Drop the charges. Apologize publicly. Call it confusion, age, grief. Or I'll share what you did with the DA and the press. Picture it. 61-year-old secretary charged in evidence tampering and tax fraud. Tax fraud? I blinked, and the second edge presented itself. The envelopes at Christmas. The cash in thank you cards. The tips you tucked into your purse. Small, but not declared. 10 here, 50 there. The law doesn't care how pretty you write the numbers, Mom. I set the letter down like it might bleed through the table. Brenda came within the hour. She listened without interrupting, then asked the question good law asks. Tell me everything. Don't manage the story, give it to me raw. I did about the holiday cash I thought was kindness, about the margin notes in that old case, about the way power sounds harmless when it wears a suit. She wrote fast, then slower. Ignorance isn't a shield, she said gently, but context matters. Coercion matters. Scale matters. And timing matters most of all. She tapped the envelope. He wants to own the clock, so we break it. How? My voice felt thin with old shame. There are sins that shrink you even when no one is looking. We go first, she said. We confess before he accuses. We take away his leverage. We show his letters for what they are, continuing abuse by other means. We disclose the small tax issue to revenue with an attorney letter and an offer to pay penalties. We disclose the Williams matter to the DA, with full context, non-attorney staff following a partner's instruction under mistaken belief of procedure. No personal gain, no ongoing conduct. We'll ask for discretionary leniency because you are a material witness in an active domestic violence and financial fraud case, currently under threat. In plain terms, we turn your secrets into evidence of his control. Confess. The word felt like stepping into cold water. On camera, controlled, limited, and factual, she said. I'll stand next to you. We invite select press. We don't feed the spectacle, we feed the record. He loses his ammunition, and you keep your life. Clarice squeezed my hand. He's counting on your shame, she whispered. Shame keeps you quiet. Don't give him that. I spent the afternoon in a chair by Clarice's window watching children chalk galaxies onto the pavement. I thought of the file rooms I'd organized, the systems I trusted. I thought of the husband who left when Ethan was 8 and the ways I patched holes with extra shifts and extra softness. I thought of the tiny envelopes that felt like gratitude and now looked like traps laid by time. And then I thought of soup, of salt, of a wall rinsed clean while my lip dripped patience. Some stains are honest. Some are secrets. I had both. Only one of them was mine to keep. That night, the second letter came angrier, sloppier, more desperate than the first. You're late, Mom. If you don't visit me Friday alone, you'll see what I can do. I have recordings too. Cameras in the house? You think I didn't know? I have you taking cash from clients. I have your notes. I have everything. It was absurd and possible at once. The way threats are when you've lived inside too many of them. Brenda read it, lips pressed thin. This letter helps us, she said. It shows pattern. It shows intent. It shows he cannot stop even from custody. We drafted. We itemized. We called the accounting firm that handled my retirement to request old statements I should have memorized. We called revenue to ask for the department that receives voluntary disclosures. We prepared the affidavit about Williams with dates, names, and my particular small part in a larger ethical failure. Each sentence was a sanding down of fear. Each number admitted was a brick laid in a path out. In the morning, we met a journalist Brenda trusted. Not a scavenger, a recorder. She set ground rules. No lurid details. No victim porn. No speculation beyond the facts we could stand behind in a courtroom. We would speak once, clearly. We would not perform. When the cameras arrived too, not 10, I felt my stomach drop the way it does in elevators. Brenda stood to my left like an anchor. Clarice behind the lights like a lamp. I taught my voice to be steady. My name is Monica Davis, I said to the lens, to the city, to the part of me that still wanted to hide. For 3 years I have been a victim of domestic abuse and financial control by my son, Ethan Davis. He is currently in custody on related charges. He is attempting to blackmail me from jail using things from my past I am now placing in the light. Then I told it what I had done without understanding. What I didn't report because I thought small meant harmless. How shame builds rooms for abusers to move into when fists won't reach. I did not cry. I did not explain beyond the truth. I placed the letters on the podium in clear sleeves like exhibits and said the words I wished. Someone had said into a microphone for me 3 years ago, "Secrets are oxygen for men like my son." I am done supplying air. After, there was a silence that felt like the inside of a chapel. The journalist thanked me without squeezing sympathy out of my face. Brenda ushered them out with the efficiency of a woman who has shepherded many people through the worst day of their lives. When the door closed, I realized my hands were shaking not from fear, but from the sudden lightness of having no pocket left to search. The calls began within hours, not from gossips, but from systems. The DA's office, confirming receipt of our disclosure and reiterating that I was a cooperating witness under threat, not a target. A senior investigator asked careful follow-ups, then said, "We'll refer the firm conduct to the bar separately. Our focus is your safety and his prosecution." Revenue emailed a case number and a payment plan that fit inside a real world. The numbers looked big to a woman who had been living on $20 a week. Then I remembered the new ledger we were writing. Debt paid in daylight. Late afternoon, Brenda's phone lit with a name that made me stand. Raphael Miller, she said, Ethan's boss, the one who started the accounting stones rolling. She put it on speaker. His voice was tempered steel. "Mrs. Davis, first, I'm sorry. We should have seen sooner. Second, we've kept digging. The theft began 2 years ago, not 6 months. It totals $130,000. He forged reports. He sold confidential briefs. We will prosecute fully." He paused, then surprised me. "We also reviewed your work history. Your references are exceptional. When this is over, if you want work steady, dignified, we have a place for someone who can rebuild what he broke." I leaned against Clarice's counter and let the words touch the part of me that believed I was only what had been taken. Work, not to survive him, to outlive him. As dusk settled, I walked across the street to my house with Clarice and Brenda. Official business first. We photographed again, catalogued again, like archaeologists of a small domestic Pompeii. On the kitchen counter, the foundation bottle stood where I'd left it, ridiculous and tall. I picked it up, unscrewed the cap, and poured a thin river down the drain. It swirled like a pale lie and vanished. Back at Clarice's, after tea and the last necessary form, I stepped onto her back porch alone. The hedge between our houses glowed with the small red eye of the camera she had placed there for me. The street was quiet. Somewhere a television murmured a sitcom's pretend problems. I lifted my face to the dark and breathed. Not perfectly, not bravely, but freely. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from the jail. I didn't listen. Not yet. Not tonight. I'd learned something new. Sometimes strength is not answering. Sometimes confession is not collapse. Sometimes the bravest sentence a woman can write is the one that ends a story others hoped to keep telling for her. Tomorrow would bring court, papers, and a judge. Maybe Savannah's eyes finally clearing. Maybe the word bail spoken and denied. But tonight brought this. A body learning that shaking can mean the adrenaline of survival, not the tremor of terror. A mind discovering that truth, once spoken plainly, does not kill you. It builds a door. I closed it gently behind me and went to sleep with the light off. The courthouse smelled of paper and rain. Outside, the clouds hung low, silver like a promise not yet made. Brenda walked beside me through the corridor's echo, our steps clicking in quiet sync. Clarice waited near the benches, her hands folded around a thermos of coffee she'd brewed for me at dawn. "Drink," she whispered. "Even strength needs warmth." When they called my name, the sound carried weight. Monica Davis versus Ethan Davis. No mother should ever hear her life titled like a lawsuit. But I stood anyway. My knees did not tremble. Inside the courtroom, he was smaller than I remembered. Not in height, but in certainty. His suit wrinkled, his hair uneven. Without control, he looked like what he always was. An ordinary man who mistook fear for power. He turned his head once as I passed. That old smile flickered. The one that used to make me obey before I understood it was built on theft. I didn't meet it. I looked at the judge instead, at the clean wood of the bench, the flag that hung in deliberate stillness. The judge read the summary. Domestic abuse, coercion, fraud, blackmail. Each word stacked on the last like bricks sealing a door behind me. I listened to the prosecutor's voice, calm, certain, describing how Ethan used my pension, my name, and my silence as currency. When she finished, she placed the recording from Clarice's camera on the desk. Ethan's own voice filled the room. "If you open your mouth, I'll destroy you." The sound didn't hurt this time. It freed something. Brenda's hand brushed mine under the table. The small human reminder that witnesses don't stand alone anymore. His lawyer tried the expected script. She's elderly, confused, manipulated by neighbors and media attention. The judge didn't even look up from the file. "The evidence speaks louder than adjectives," she said flatly. And it did. When it was my turn to speak, the room waited. I had written a statement, but I didn't read it. Instead, I told the truth in the language I'd earned. I believed love could fix anything, I said. So when my son came home, I opened the door and forgot to lock it behind me. He took my money, my voice, and my peace, but he didn't take my will. That's what I'm reclaiming now. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because I want my story back. There was no applause. No gasp, no cinematic swell, just the steady hum of the ceiling lights, the sound of something shifting that only I could feel. The judge nodded once. "Thank you, Mrs. Davis." Then she turned to Ethan. "You will be remanded without bail pending sentencing." It was done. 3 years of quiet terror ended not with an explosion, but with paperwork. That's the thing about justice. It's not dramatic. It's procedural. It doesn't roar. It signs. Outside, Clarice hugged me first. "You did it," she said, her voice shaking. Brenda smiled, eyes tired, like someone who's seen too many endings that never came. "Now we start the next file," she said, "the one labeled after." The news ran that night. A short segment, 40 seconds long. Retired secretary exposes financial and domestic abuse scheme led by son. Authorities confirm arrest. My name appeared briefly on the screen. Not as a victim, as a source. That was enough. In the days that followed, the calls slowed, the paperwork multiplied, and the silence became something I could live inside again. I moved back into my house 1 week later. The walls still smelled faintly of bleach, the air cautious. I painted over the cracks he'd made with a pale yellow called morning honey. It took 3 coats to erase the last shadow. Clarice helped me hang new curtains. Brenda stopped by with folders. Evelyn called every night, her laughter sounding like forgiveness wrapped in static. Savannah came once, quiet, thinner, her wedding ring gone. She stood on my porch, eyes rimmed red. "I didn't know," she said. "Not really." I believed her, which surprised me. "He fooled us both," I said. She nodded. "If you ever need help." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Some nights I still wake at 3 a.m., expecting footsteps that never come. The body remembers longer than the mind forgives. But now when I rise, I make tea, sit by the window, and let the dawn find me. It always does. I don't hide the scars. They are proof that I learned to heal myself, proof that light can enter where control once lived. A month later, I started working part-time again, remote, sorting digital archives for the same firm Raphael runs now. The first day I logged in, my email signature autofilled. Monica Davis, Administrative Consultant. For the first time, the title felt earned. The foundation bottle sits empty on a shelf above my desk. Not as disguise, but as reminder. I keep it to remember that shame can look elegant and still be poison. I haven't bought a replacement. I wear my face uncolored, my voice uncoated. Every Sunday, Clarice and I cook together. Soup, sometimes. Never salted too much, never thrown away. We laugh when it spills because the floor is just a floor now, not a battlefield. She always says, "To peace," and I answer, "To proof." Sometimes, late at night, I imagine Ethan in whatever cell holds him. I don't picture revenge, I picture distance, the kind that finally gives me room to breathe. He'll face what he built. I'll face what I'll become. If you're watching this, if you've stayed until now, I want you to remember this. Freedom doesn't come when they say sorry. It comes when you stop waiting for it. If someone you love hurts you, control you, drains your name and your soul, leave the door open behind you. Not for them, but for yourself. Walk through it, even shaking, because safety isn't quiet. It's honest. And healing isn't revenge. It's returning to the sound of your own voice and knowing, finally, that it belongs only to you.